Let's welcome on the stage the keynote speakers of this session. Jack Bobo, CEO of Futurity, Director, Food Systems Institute from the University of Nottingham, UK. Peter Myers, Chief Strategy Officer, Koppert Biological, Belgium. Pierre Brown, Director, Climate Resilient Agriculture, Topian, and Director of Agriculture and Livestock, NEOM, Saudi Arabia. And Sylvain Charlebois, Professor and Director, Food Analytics Lab, University of Dalhousie, Canada. Thank you.
My name is Jack Bobo. I'm the director of the Food Systems Institute at the University of Nottingham in the UK, obviously not British. I spent 13 years with the US government, though, working on global food policy, and everywhere I went, they asked, I thought we invited the Department of Agriculture. And I would always have to explain that at the Department of State, we cared about food too, and they would want to know, well, what's the difference between what they do at the State Department and what they do at the Department of Agriculture? And that's easy. At USDA, they do things. At the State Department, we talk about doing things. And so now at the university, it's my job to talk about things that other people do. And so my presentation, can agriculture save the planet? So just to lay the groundwork a little bit, though, of the challenge we have. The problems that we face, they are big, they're complex, and they're global. If we were to talk about land, 40% of all the land on Earth that could be used for agriculture is being used for agriculture today. The amount of cropland is the size of South America. The amount of pasture land is the size of Africa. There is nothing more important than agriculture when it comes to land, and I think we would probably argue that its footprint is as big, if not bigger, than we'd want it to be. If we were to talk about water, 70% of all fresh water goes to agriculture. The Colorado River, the 5th largest river in America, no longer flows to the sea. And these are largely because of agricultural withdrawals of water. If we were to talk about greenhouse gas emissions, 10 to 15% of emissions come from agriculture. Another 10 to 15% come from deforestation, 80% of which is caused by agriculture. That's almost as much as energy, and it's more than anything else. Again, huge impacts from agriculture. As if the challenge wasn't big enough, we're going to go from 8 to 9.5 billion people by 2050, meaning we're going to need about 25% more food, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. So huge impacts today, huge pressure tomorrow, but we also have 800 million people who will go to bed hungry today. It's hard for many people to wrap their minds around that. That's about 9 million people die of hunger-related illnesses every year. For many, that's a statistic. That's 25,000 people will die today of hunger. That's 1,000 people over the next hour of these sessions. That's one person every 4 seconds. Mostly children. Now, there's not a person who wouldn't go to help that hungry child if they saw them, but we often don't see the people in need. How do we get the public and governments and others to appreciate that these are not statistics, but these are people's lives? Yes, we have to do better, we have to do things in a more sustainable way, but we also need to meet the needs of this current population. So, however, when we talk about these statistics, it's one of the reasons that many people ask the question, has innovation failed? Because if we have so much science and technology that's been applied over the last 100 years, and yet things are so bad, it leads many people to think that maybe science is not the solution to the problem, but the problem to be solved. So I want to use an example outside of agriculture to address that question of has innovation failed us. So this is an example from the UK. So in the UK, the average person has about 5.5 tons of CO2 emissions per year per capita. It's more than the global average. You may not know, but this is a bad number. It's not a good number. And when we look at the statistics for agriculture and then we look at the emissions for carbon, I think it leads a lot of young people to feel like things are bad and things are getting worse. And I think that can make us despondent about what we can actually do. Can we have a difference if things are so bad and if things are getting worse? And so it's important not just to think about where we are today, but to understand where we've come from, to appreciate where we are so that we can prepare for where we're going. So 5.5 tons, not a good number, but it's the lowest point in 150 years for UK emissions. So yeah, it's a bad number, but things are improving dramatically and really quickly. And I think that numbers like that actually should give us hope as opposed to making us despair. We need to understand where we've come from. So the question of agriculture, well, what about agriculture? Well, I mentioned earlier that 800 million people will go to bed hungry. That's 10% of all the people on the planet. Totally unacceptable in this world today. But 30 years ago, 20% of all the people on the planet would have been going to bed hungry. 60 years ago, 30% of all the people on the planet would have been going to bed hungry. So 10% is totally unacceptable, and it's a terrible number, and it's yet wildly better than where we were. We need to understand where we've come from. If we were to talk about childhood mortality, it's at the lowest point in all of human history. And of course, as the chart on the screen shows, we've increased production of food dramatically since 1960, and of course that's the main reason that hunger has declined, and it's on more or less the same amount of land. We need to understand where we've come from. Now, today there are about 3.6 billion hectares of forest on the planet, and we hear a lot about how our food system is broken and that deforestation is being caused by livestock production and soybean production, and those things are all true. But what would happen if we were farming today with 1960s technology? Well, we would need 1 billion additional hectares of land to produce the food we do. So think about that. That's more than a quarter of all the forest on the planet only exist because of agricultural innovation and improvements in management practices. It's really easy to go out and see a forest that's been stripped and cut down and replaced with soybeans. It is very hard to look at a forest and say, that only exists because of innovation. So we have to be able to help people to understand this, though, because people love innovation almost as much as they despise change. And there is no place people despise change more than the food they eat, because food is what brings us together with friends and family. And if you mess with my food, you're messing with my family, and people don't like that. But if we don't change how we produce food, everything will change. So one of the thoughts I want to leave you with is that things are not bad and getting worse. They are good and getting better, but not fast enough. And that's an important change in the mindset, because if things are bad, we need to completely throw everything out and start all over again. If things are good but not good, improving fast enough, well, we need to do better faster. We need to get to our 2070 goals by 2050 or 2050 goals by 2030. The question then is, how do I help the food sector to move even faster as opposed to dismantling that system? So I think an important part of this is just changing our mindset. So I think when most people think about the future, they ask two questions. What do I think will happen, and what should I do about it? Now, those are really reasonable things to ask, and this is really what strategic planning is all about. It's about preparing for the future that we expect. Strategic planning is about preparing for the future that we expect. Now, I spent many years working as a food futurist. A futurist is a title that you give yourself so that you can charge more as a consultant. To the students in the room, I highly recommend it. It is really great. But one of the things that we do as a futurist, though, we think about the future differently. A futurist is not about predicting the future. It's about preparing for it. How many people think the most likely future, the probable future, is the best possible future? Yeah, I don't think so. I think there is a future out there that could be wildly good for farmers, for consumers, for the planet, but it's not the most likely future. And that's the problem with strategic planning. It's preparing to get us to a place that nobody wants to go to, as opposed to preparing to go to a place that's even better. So one of the other thoughts I want to leave you with is that we need to stop preparing for the future that we expect, and we need to start creating the future that we want. The things we do tomorrow to get to our best future are different than the things we do tomorrow to prepare for the worst future. We need to change how we prepare for the future. So I want you to know why this particular moment in history matters. I already mentioned that we're going from 8 to 9.5 billion people, and that's when most people stop thinking about the future, after 2050. But if we do think about the world after 2050, what we realize is population growth slows dramatically. And that's because we're not having more children. The number of children born this year is more than the number that will be born next year, and more than the year after that, the year after that, and the year after that. We have already reached peak child. There will never be more children born than this year. 100% of population growth is because of people living longer. It's a good news story. It's about health and nutrition. But we will not live forever unless Elon Musk has something to do with it. So at some points, population growth slows and even reverses. So the challenge we face is not to produce more and more food forever with things getting worse and worse and worse. The challenge we face is to get to 2050 without screwing things up. After that, we have this huge opportunity. Every day between now and 2050, it gets harder to feed the world. But every day after 2050, it will get easier to feed the world if we haven't cut down our forests and drained our rivers, our lakes, and our aquifers. If we do, we are good forever. So the thought that I want to leave you with is, the next 25 years are not just the most important 25 years there have ever been in the 10,000-year history of agriculture, and they're the most important 25 years there will ever be in the history of agriculture. And that's why we have to get it right, and that's why the work you're doing is so critically important. But science tells us what we can do, and the public tells us what we should do. And if we don't find a way to bring the public along, we won't be able to have agriculture save the planet. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me here. My name is Pieter Maas. I'm a CSO, Chief Strategy Officer at Koppert. I'm a businessman and I'm an agriculture engineer. And my whole career, I have been serving farmers and growers. So the first presentation, what I'm going to do, I'm going to showcase that I'm going to try to bring it in practice. And the question, I can already show you, the question is yes, but. We are in a VUCA world, I think you know that. And predictability is becoming very, very, very difficult. Who knows what's going to happen in 3 years from now? Or who knows what's going to happen in 5 years from now? Or who knows what's going to happen even next year? Do we know that? Difficult, right? So, looking into that world, how are we going to act? How are we going to take decisions? How can we make steps forward? Looking to society, looking to farmers and consumers. Because at the end, why we are here, is that farmers and the growers need to do the job to become a more sustainable agriculture. And I think that's the title of IFAMA today, right? Innovation and sustainability. And for sure, I think you know these books. So actually what we are doing was already predicted somewhere in the past. Richard Carson already warned us for the overuse of chemical pesticides in Silent Spring. The Club of Rome already announced there is something as an end on growth. And how are we going to deal with that? And how are we going to take care about the environmental impact. These are in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And where are we today? Time to act. So as Koppert, we are active in the world of biocontrol, in the world of beneficial insects and microorganisms against pests and diseases. You see here all these beautiful sweet peppers and melons. On these products in Spain, natural enemies has been used to combat pest insects. There are almost no chemical pesticides anymore used. This is the future. The future is started today, but we are not aware of it. Our not speed up has been said. And that's where we try to contribute and taking part of. And our mission is to contribute to the health of the people and the planet. In partnership with nature to make agriculture healthier, safer, and more productive. That's why we are here. And I think that fits perfectly in what IFAMA is want to reach here at this session, but for sure also in the future. And our market is divided in three main pillars. The horticulture market, that means protected greenhouses, like here in Almeria, or in the Netherlands, which is then the glasshouse industry, where in a very robust system and a very balanced biodiverse system, fruits and vegetables can be produced with a tremendous density of production efficiency. Much more than currently is doing in the agri-crops, which is the second part of our business. Just to give you some figures, our business today is roughly 500 million. We are doing that with 3,000 employees, 30 owned subsidiaries, and we are selling our products in more than 100 countries, serving the farmer and the grower. And as that, we are also contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals, which is there, of course, given as a kind of a matrix, as a flow where businesses need to be aligned to. And I think we all of us know that some of these are fundamental in serving some of the challenges and the solutions where we are heading to. Because these are the challenges. I don't go too much in detail. You all know them by mind. One I want to mention, and we are regularly talking about CO2, the carbon. The biggest challenge, in my perspective, is biodiversity. The loss of biodiversity and how an ecosystem, and agriculture, horticulture is part of the ecosystem, and we as humans too are going to safeguard the biodiversity on our planet. And there I believe that agriculture, horticulture has a key and part of the solution in hand. Because the world is changing dramatically. The consumer awareness regarding food safety. You all have been a very beautiful lunch and probably a dinner tonight. You don't bother about residues on your fruits and vegetables, right? Because it's organized properly. But in many places on our planet, it's not. And we still have a way to go. The government legislation is putting also there an impact on it. They are supporting that by fading out step by step the chemical fertilizers and are demanding farmers and growers not to overuse artificial fertilizers. They really want to contribute that Europe is there a front runner in the rest of the world with the Green Deal, with the natural restoration law, etc. And this is where governments are pushing us as an industry and as consumers to step forward and to take our responsibility. And for the introduction of biologicals, big steps need to be made. And these are just the key drivers where biologicals need to step in. So when chemical pesticides are not working anymore, the biologicals comes in. And I can tell you, in Spain, in the Netherlands, and in a lot of other countries, biologicals are already becoming mainstream. So we are on our way. We are on our way to go to the first questions. Is agriculture capable to overcome some of the challenges where we are in? We are very much convinced of this. Because we are moving to a paradigm shift. We have an old way of attitude regarding the use of disease management and pest management. And we are very much convinced that with the biologicals, and here is coming another word, if we take care of biodiversity, we need to take care of microorganisms in our soil. And when we take care of microorganisms in our soil, we take care of microorganisms in our body. And we start to understand more and more that keeps us more healthy. But it also means if we take care of our soils, we take care of our crop. And we get a very robust horticulture and agriculture ecosystem. And when we get a healthy and agriculture ecosystem, we get a healthy economy. And when we get a healthy and robust economy, we get a healthy and robust society. So I go back to my first question. Are we capable with each other in agriculture to be part of the solutions? My answer is yes. Thank you very much.
So I'm Pierre Braun, I'm the head of agriculture at NEOM. Work for a company called Topian, which was created recently, which is the company that's in charge of producing food for NEOM and to be at the forefront of innovation in food for the country. Next slide, please. I'll explain how we are developing agriculture to be at the service of food security for Saudi Arabia. And, oh yes. So how does this relate to what we're talking about today is that we are really in a very unique situation in Saudi Arabia. We are in a desert, and we are trying to produce food sustainably. And this puts a lot of constraints on us, which I think can help us develop and implement technologies that can be more largely useful for us to create a healthy future of the planet in producing food. So as has been said in some of the talks before, we are facing multiple challenges in that the population is increasing. It's an opportunity as well. In our particular case, we are faced with very severe water restrictions. And as you may know, 70% of fresh water is used for agriculture today. And we are also facing an agricultural system which is consuming a lot of energy and contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a responsibility to do it better, and we have the opportunity at NEOM to do it from scratch and to develop a hub for innovation that is going to serve a more sustainable food production system as an engine for the country and as an example for others. So for agriculture in particular, what we are serving is self-sufficiency for the country. The country is currently importing a lot of food. And we are concentrating on innovations that increase resilience of agriculture in the face of very extreme climate in order to have a very productive system that is having a positive environmental impact. We want to do this in a way that is profitable, that will be attractive, where we can not only be successful, but also attract investors to come and follow up. And in being able to do that requires for us to also develop the farmer of tomorrow in the kingdom and build the capacity so that it can be brought forward further. The opportunity for us is that, as I said, there's still a very large importation of fruit and vegetable, in particular in the country. And so we have the challenge and the opportunity to produce those in an efficient manner in a way that we can be competitive with imports. We want to do this in a way that is going to be very efficient, particularly in the use of water. And we are also facing a food production system in Saudi Arabia, which is very traditional, very seasonal, with a lot of issues with quality, also with food waste that we have an opportunity to solve. So we are planning to, really starting from zero, to produce 450,000 tons by 2030 of fruit and vegetable. We want to do this by leveraging technology and putting in place a system that's sustainable. The way we are going about it is, since we're building everything from scratch, at the same time as everything is happening from zero at NEOM, all the infrastructure is being built. This goes in the context of urban planning in which we have to fit. We want to start with piloting a lot of the ideas that we have about producing food sustainably. And so we are putting in place pilot infrastructure in which we will test the different solutions that we want to implement to see how we can optimize them, how we can make them efficient, and also how we can meet the needs of the market and grow the needs of the market in order to be successful. So this involves a lot of modeling, a lot of assumptions that we need to test, validate with both by producing and by testing on the market. So we are actually putting in place a range of different production systems which go from very high-tech to lower tech, but with always the aim to save water and to be efficient. And so there is a range of investment that's required from the high-tech to the low-tech. The productivity typically decreases from an end to the other, and then also the crops that you can grow, the range varies. What we did in our modeling was to look at what is the market today, what are the opportunities, what can we grow under our conditions, what is the most suited for the different infrastructure, and then we're going to pilot this and at the same time as we develop the commercial scale agriculture so that we can be efficient about it. So this is on the right, you can see a map of NEOM. So we are at the northwest of Saudi Arabia. There's the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba to the northwest. And NEOM is this region which is about the size of Belgium in which we are trying to develop agriculture. So we are developing an infrastructure in various places. You can see that the pilots are ranging from the coast at what is called Oxagon, which is the future industrial port, to the northwest. There's a city there called Al-Bada, which is very dry, a little higher. And then we also are developing in Tabuk, which is 800 meters above sea level, very dry climate, and this offers a number of opportunities. The reason why we are spreading geographically like this is to be able to test under the different conditions and have the right type of production systems for the right type of geography. Ultimately, we know that we will have to produce in the Tabuk region, and we will be using a variety of systems that we, right now we're starting on an assumption that we will have a lot of the volume, close to 90% will be coming out of greenhouses because we need to control the climate to be successful, have the high productivity, the high volume for water use, and we'll be probably concentrating on at the lower end of investment, but not the very low end. And so this is where we will have 32% of what we call mid-tech greenhouses, supplying about 65% of volume. In the future, we want to develop in the Tabuk region, but we're also exploring the possibility to produce closer to urban centers such as Riyadh, and this is something that we are doing. Today, we've started with, in collaboration with a Dutch company, Van der Hoeven, to build a 4-hectare high-tech greenhouse, which is fully controlled, which offers 8 compartments which we can pilot separately, which will allow us to test a lot of conditions and crops. A cousin to it is in Tabuk, so 800 meters high, and we will be able to then look at the effect of the climate and on the types of conditions and crops that we can grow. And this is the greenhouse seen from the sky as it stands today. We will planning to complete the project by the end of 2024. And this is what the Tabuk cousin looks like today. So we're already starting, beginning of 25 is the completion date. So what we are trying to do is to develop not only these types of greenhouses, but a range of structures which will start the production, which will allow us to test their potential and to see how we can also develop the crops so that they fit the market and they can be tested in a way that tells us what success looks like. So in summary, we are trying to develop agriculture in a very challenging system, and we want to do so by using the latest innovation, which mainly is aimed at saving water. We are in a very extreme climate, and we think that we can, in what we develop, we can help others also think about, in their marginal conditions, what are the solutions that will work. We are really starting from the consumer in defining our system. We have the luxury to define everything from the get-go in a way that we think is going to work on the long term, and in a way that we will bring quality produce, better nutrition, and a sustainable way of production to the country. We are doing this by leveraging pilot infrastructure, which is something that's quite unique, which will be a model for everything commercial that goes after this. And what's really important is that we need to do this in the context of Saudi Arabia with the stakeholders, working with them, working with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the industry, with the future investors, with the local populations, to improve our impact and being able to build a sustainable and successful agricultural production system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre. I guess I'm last. Have you enjoyed the 3 presentations so far? Very positive, huh? I'm just wondering, I mean, we're asking ourselves if agriculture can be saved, or can we save the planet? I actually am wondering, why are we asking ourselves that question when we're growing tomatoes in the desert? I mean, and over the last few days we've seen great technologies being developed. As Jack said, we've made some tremendous progress over the last several decades. So I do wonder, why do we ask ourselves these questions? Can agriculture solve humanity's biggest challenge and simultaneously save the planet? Jack said one thing that, that I do want to challenge in a friendly way. You said, we need to do what people want us to do, or something like that. That's what we should be doing, what consumers want. I would push back a little bit on that, because consumers will want based on dangerous, imperfect information. Look at the EU right now. When you have a population wanting things based on imperfect information, and when you have politicians and people treating science like a buffet, you get bad policy. And bad policy leads to market failures and inefficiencies. In my view, that's the biggest challenge we face. How do we make sure that consumers, citizens, have access to the right information in terms of the tremendous things we're doing so well? I mean, we're having problems recruiting in the agri-food sector. Why? Because we're constantly telling them how bad things are. Farmers don't make money. Agri-food sector doesn't make money. They should be making too much money. You know, they're responsible for the problems we have with climate change. It's always negative. And you come to IFAMA for the positives, for therapy. That's what we need. This therapy we're going through is essentially what the world needs, in my view. But there is one thing that I want to talk about that hasn't been discussed yet, that I think needs to be discussed beyond the bad or good policy, beyond the technologies, beyond all of the things that we're seeing right now. The one thing that really concerns me every single day are geopolitics. Case on point, Ukraine. You know, we can plan, We can do all sorts of things. We can grow tomatoes in the desert if we like. But overnight, things can shift brutally, painfully. And all of a sudden, we have half the world impacted by a tyrant, basically, taking over another country. There's a lot of instability in the world. So, as a lab, what we decided to do a few years ago, if I can actually make this work, I think it's actually affecting, it's a plague. Go to the second slide, please, as I talk. I'm like a talk show host. Here's. Geopolitics, to me, are, in my view, the greatest challenge we face as a sector, if you want to call it a sector, because we never know what's going to happen. And every single day, yes, climate change is a big, big factor, but geopolitics are really concerning just because of the severity and how quickly things can shift. And agriculture can't really adapt that quickly, you know? So with Ukraine, for example, two years ago, knowing that 18% of all calories consumed around the world is based on wheat, you knew that something was going to be wrong. Canada, the US, everyone was impacted for several months. We're getting out of that right now, but it's been tough. So what we've decided to do at the lab at Dalhousie University was to create an index. It's not out yet. It's not published. So this is a teaser for you. We're basically looking at how countries are influencing others through policy, through stupidity, through all sorts of things. And we're starting to figure out that just looking at the data, looking at the numbers, some countries are way more influential than others. Now, we only looked at the G20, so if you're actually trying to find your country there, that's the reason why it's not there. We only look at the G20. We could expand the sample down the road, but in Canada, for example, whatever happens in the US affects us eventually. But we all know that what happens in China will impact the entire planet eventually. It's a massive region, and it's very influential. It influences our food affordability. It influences access to food. It influences everything we prioritize as a nation, as a sector. And so overnight, some of these countries have the power to really shift things very quickly. So that's one thing that concerns me a lot. The other thing that concerns me in terms of, next slide, please. I'll just say next. So geopolitics, next slide, please. There's geopolitics, and of course, there's the issue of carbon. Now, we talked about climate change many times. We should be talking about climate change. Climate change is really the big variable affecting agriculture every single day. You look at this region is just amazing when it comes to greenhouse production. I wish we would have that in Canada. We're just starting to ramp up our greenhouse capacity. It's been tough, it's been challenging. But I would say that really climate change is a tremendous opportunity for the sector. I just hope that we can shift the narrative from saying climate change is a threat, is a menace, to climate change is an opportunity. You know, there's a lot of talk about decarbonizing the economy. Great. That's what we need. Opportunity. And some of the things that we're seeing are things, I'm a distribution person, so I look at supply chains, things like friendshoring, nearshoring, onshoring. That's what we're seeing more. We're seeing companies actually looking at their topography very differently because there is a carbon market. There is a price to pay if you make Kellogg's in Asia to feed North America. Before there wasn't. Now there is. And that's a good thing. And so wherever you live around the world, you have to think about supply chains very differently. Farmers will farm. But how that food will go to market will vary greatly based on that carbon/finance/opportunity equation. That's really critical. And you're seeing it every day. Companies are really shifting all the time. Companies are smart. They'll actually make decisions to make money, but most importantly, to make money while feeding people more rapidly, more efficiently. That's what we need. But I do think that with the future, there are great opportunities when it comes to the environment overall. Next slide, please. And I'll end on that. We talk a lot about proteins, of course, and proteins are a really big component of our diets. And when you talk to companies, when you talk to sectors like pork, beef, chicken, they're afraid of, the menace, the alternatives, the lab-grown proteins. I don't see it the same. And I think more and more people are starting to see the end of the stomach share mentality. Food is no longer a zero-sum game. It used to be. If I get into your stomach, you won't. I win, you lose. That's ending. Because consumers see value. They make decisions based on value. And we heard that from students before lunch. Serving the consumer, seeking that value. That's going to drive decisions. It's going to drive decisions by consumers, decisions by companies as well. So that stomach share mentality, I think, is coming to an end. Which means that, if you're in pork or in dairy, vegetables, doesn't matter. You're going to be looking at the center of the plate, of course, because that's been the battle, center of the plate. Now we're starting to see commodities, groups, companies looking at the periphery of the plate as an opportunity as well. It's no longer a zero-sum game. And the more we embrace that, the more we'll see innovation being normalized in industry. Because I agree, innovation is sometimes seen as a dirty word in the agri-food sector because a lot of people don't like change. But I do think that change will come because, we'll embrace it. Thank you very much.